1776, after declaring independence, the United States of America had to determine how they were going to govern themselves. The first written constitution was called the Articles of Confederation. Created in 1777, the Articles of Confederation created a government that had no president, no executive branch, no judiciary branch, and no way to tax the people, all of which came later in the Constitution with no income. The federal government had no way to pay off the debts of the Revolutionary War, except by requesting money from the states and selling land in the Northwest Territory. By 1787, the United States was in a depression. Farmers in particular had a lot of debt. So Daniel Shays led a group of rebels to try to seize weapons and overthrow the government. Although Shays' rebellion was unsuccessful in overthrowing the government, it is significant because it forced the federal government to come together in a convention and try to revise the Articles of Confederation to create a more powerful central government that would help the people. The result of the attempt to revise the Articles of Confederation was a whole new document called the United States Constitution. It was written in 1787, mainly by James Madison, who was often called the father of the Constitution. The Constitution has 6 goals and is based on 7 major principles, all of which are still applied in today's society.
Take it off.
The preamble to the Constitution lists the 6 goals for the United States government. Today we'll go over the most important 3. Governor Morris was at the Constitutional Convention as a delegate from Pennsylvania. He wrote the inspiring preamble and helped write and edit much of the rest of the Constitution. He also had the first line of the Constitution read, "We the people of the United States of America." The following 3 goals guided the Constitution's framers as they created the new government. The first goal of the government was to form a more perfect union. Under the Articles of Confederation, the states functioned like independent nations, often disagreeing on defense and finances. The framers believed that the states needed to agree to operate as a single country and cooperate on major issues. The second goal of the government was to establish justice. For the framers, treating each citizen equally was a fundamental principle. The Constitution provides a national system of courts to protect the people's rights and hear cases involving violations of federal law and disputes among the states. The third goal of the government was to ensure domestic tranquility. The violent protests of Shays' Rebellion in 1786 shocked Americans. The Constitution seeks to keep peace among the people.
The last 3 of the 6 goals of the government, as stated in the preamble, are: number 4, to provide for the common defense. Under the Articles of Confederation, America's defense depended on the state militias. The Constitution gives the federal government the power to maintain armed forces to protect the country and its citizens from attack. The 5th goal is to promote the general welfare. The Declaration of Independence states that the purpose of the government is to promote life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to the people of the nation. The Constitution's job was to promote the general welfare or well-being of the people by maintaining order, protecting individual liberties, regulating commerce, that people follow the laws, and promoting science and technology. The 6th goal of the government is to ensure the blessings of liberty. The framers believed that preserving liberty should be a major goal for generations to come. The Constitution guarantees or promises that no American's basic rights will be taken away now or for posterity. The 6 goals of the Constitution remain as important today as they were when the Constitution was written.
There are 7 principles to the Constitution. The first principle or rule is popular sovereignty. The framers lived in a time when the king believed that their power to rule comes from God. The Constitution had a new idea, that the government gets its authority to rule from the people. The preamble is the introduction of the Constitution. It was written by Governor Morris. It begins with the words, "We the people." It reflects the idea that is the right of the people to govern themselves. People are the source of the government. The second principle is republicanism, which means people elect their political representatives. Republicanism is a form of government. Instead of having citizens directly participating in the government to help decide everything, citizens elect a representative to do the voting for them and carry out their wishes. Once elected, the representatives must remain open to the opinions of the people they represent. In our republic, people of each state vote for their 2 representatives. Each state gets 2 members in the Senate, and the number of representatives in the House of Representatives is based on the state's population. For example, California has 53 representatives in the House of Representatives. Representatives meet with the representatives from other states to debate about their ideas. The representatives discuss topics until they can come to an agreement, which sometimes becomes a law.
In the 1700s, colonists lived under a king who abused his power and would tax the colonists when they had no representation in Parliament. The framers or writers of the Constitution wanted to avoid tyranny in the new government. Tyranny is the abuse of power by the government like they had with the British king. So the framers of the Constitution knew they needed to limit the powers of the new government by writing a constitution. The Constitution says what the government can and cannot do. By writing it, the framers of the Constitution protected the people and the government, and they can do only what the Constitution says. Federalism is the division of powers between the national and the state governments. There are certain things that national and state governments can and can't do. For example, the national government has the power to regulate trade, set standard weights and measures, admit new states, create federal courts, declare war, and establish post offices. States have their own powers as well. States can make corporation laws, regulate trade in their own borders, establish schools, establish local government, provide public safety, and make laws about marriage and divorce.
Based on the ideas of the French writer Baron de Montesquieu, the federal or national government is separated into 3 individual branches. Of these branches, one of them would be the legislative branch, and this is where laws are written and executed. The next section is the executive branch, which is where the president and other members and officials in the government carry out the aforesaid laws, as well as oversee all matters and decisions made within the branches and the government. Lastly, there is the judicial branch. This branch is the section in which the judges of courts study and interpret the law, in addition to making sure the law abides by the Constitution. Checks and balances are considered to be a safeguard to our government in the way that they make sure our 3 branches, executive, judicial, and legislative, watch over each other and also do not abuse their individual powers. For instance, imagine that the legislative branch wanted to pass a law or bill that stated that one could only have 3 pets if they lived in New York. The judicial branch could review this law and veto it by responding that the aforesaid law would be insensible. Then the executive branch could deny this law as well, thus completing the cycle that is the making of a law and also illustrating the individual powers that a certain branch is entitled to. Moreover, when the executive branch is not doing its proper job correctly and is not following its responsibilities, the legislative branch and the judicial branch can potentially investigate the executive branch to observe whether or not it is using the power that it is given. Throughout the judicial branch's Supreme Court ruling during any time, the legislative branch and the executive branch are able to oversee the court to make sure that the correct procedures are being followed by the judicial branch, and if they are not being fulfilled, that the correct punishments are given and dealt. This system of checks and balances are constructed and followed so that every branch watches over each other, and that every decision and event within the government is efficient, with no severe arguments between or among the branches, or otherwise, no abusement of power on any side.
The First Amendment of the Bill of Rights guarantees certain individual freedoms. One of the freedoms it ensures is religious freedom, but it is not absolute. For example, if someone practices a religion that involves lighting an animal or person on fire and sacrificing them to the gods, then that religion is illegal. This is because it harms the rights of others and even ends the life of a living creature. If a religion does not harm the well-being or rights of others, then the government cannot terminate it. For instance, members of a church can freely have service as long as it doesn't endanger others and their rights. Freedom of speech is also limitedly ensured by the First Amendment. One can express his or her opinions as long as it does not endanger the rights and safety of others. People can talk freely about how they feel on certain topics, but they can't say something to physically harm others. For example, one cannot enter a plane and yell "bomb." This causes commotion and endangers the safety of the passengers on the plane. The First Amendment limitedly protects certain rights of the people that cannot be taken away.
Although there are many important amendments, here are a few. Amendment 2 says the amendment protects the military that is necessary for a country. It is also saying that people have the right to weapons and cannot be infringed for that unless they use the weapons in a not acceptable behavior. Obviously, a child cannot have a weapon, but adults have the right to. Amendment 4 says that the private property of someone cannot be taken away. It is also saying that there cannot be random searches unless there is a warrant. If you do not follow Amendment 4, you are violating the rights of someone and there could be severe punishments. Last but not least, Amendment 5 says that United States citizens have the right to trial with a jury. However, soldiers and other members of the military do not have right necessarily to a jury. Also, Amendment 5 protects citizens from double jeopardy, which is being tried again for the same charges.
In a lot of places, you could be thrown in jail without knowing why. With the 5th and 6th Amendments, you have the right to a trial, knowledge of your crime, and a lawyer. Amendments 5 and 6 outline the due process of law. Amendment 5 states that life, liberty, and property cannot be taken away without the process of law. Amendment 6 details the rights you have. You have the right to a speedy trial, impartial judgment from your peers, and knowledge of your crime before imprisonment. These laws assure that justice is served. Okay.